Welcome to Go Get Great, the podcast for aspiring entrepreneurs and ambitious small business owners. I'm your host, Brittany, owner of Brittany Miller Socials and mother of 3. Go Get Great is all about helping you make life and business work together. You'll learn about the fumbles that helped get me and my guests to where we are today so you don't have to make them. So come join the journey with Go Get Great. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Go Get Great podcast. I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Natasha Kiemel. She is a registered psychologist, speaker, and the founder of Graciously You Psychology Services, which provides telehealth appointments to women across Australia. She has over 13 years training in the field of psychology and has been helping clients with their mental health for over 8 years. Natasha is very passionate about bringing the world of psychology online and giving women access to high quality support regardless of location. So to do this, she has just launched her second business, Graciously Redefine You, and will be launching her signature course, Invitation to Align and Elevate, next year. And she has an evergreen course that she's launching this year, which I think will be super interesting and exciting for some of you listeners. So Natasha and I are chatting today about all things psychology and mindset, both as an entrepreneur. And we even talk a little bit about preparing for your peri and postnatal periods if you are expecting as an entrepreneur. I always like to build that in if I can with guests that have experience in that field, because it is definitely a big transition. And the more you can prepare, the easier it is. So without further ado, I am bringing Natasha on. Okay, good morning and welcome back to the Go Get Great podcast, and welcome, Natasha. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you this morning?
I'm good, thank you. I'm ready to go. And I think it is. It's morning here, it's evening there.
It is, but I release my episodes in the morning, so I always say good morning even when I record at night. So before we get going, I would love for you to introduce yourself in your own words for our listeners and tell us a little bit about where you're from too, because I'm sure they're going to notice your lovely accent.
Yes, I'm sure I do have an accent. So my name's Natasha. I'm a registered psychologist here in Australia, and I run 2 businesses. So I have a telehealth psychological practice, which is called Graciously You Psychological Services. And then I also have a course platform, which is called Gracefully Redefine You. And so through that, I release courses and other resources that are based on kind of the work that I do one-on-one with clients. It's kind of the psychological teachings to support women. So yeah, my whole thing is around essentially supporting women with their mental health and to help them kind of create the lives that they want to be living and to regulate their nervous systems and to support their minds, their bodies, and just them really overall.
Which is great, because one of the key things that I try and focus on in the podcast is to share practical tips to help you blend in life and business. And one of the big things is helping you manage your mindset, because that is going to make or break whether your business is successful. So I'm happy to have you here chatting about that. I would really love to know how you got into the field of psychology, though.
Yes. So it was a book. I was, I think, 16 or 17 years old, and I was on holiday with my family, and my older sister, who's several years older than me, was already studying psychology, and I had no interest. I wanted to become a graphic designer or an interior designer. And so I was very artistic and everything like that. Whether it was good, it's questionable. But so I was on holiday and she gives me this book and I read it, and it was just the perfect combination of getting me fired up. So it was called A Friend Like Henry. It was about written from a mother's perspective about her son who had autism and how she had to be incredibly resilient and resourceful to support her own son. So this was probably about 20 years ago to 30 years ago when this mother was bringing up her son. And so very different perspective, very different understanding within the medical community and within society around that. And so it was just the right combination of being so angry at the way she was being treated and what was happening to this family, and just fascinated. I'd never come across behavioral intervention before. She was using, so Henry was the dog. And so she was incredibly resourceful resourceful and she found that connection between her son and the dog and was utilizing that to kind of teach him about emotions and how to teach him about certain things. And I was just so captivated and so just really, captivated that I went and started looking up what psychology actually was. And once I read it, I remember we got this pamphlet, or I don't know if it was mine or my sister's, and I read what psychologists do, and it just fit. I can remember where I was sitting in my bedroom. I can remember like what the lighting was. And I just had that moment of like, yeah, like that's it. And, incredibly privileged to have that as such a young age and to still love what I'm doing to this day. And yeah, so that really just started my journey. So I went and looked more and more into it. I don't think, yes, it was definitely like a paper booklet that I read. This was, gosh, I won't go into how long. It was a considerable amount of time ago. So yeah, looked into it, totally changed what I was going to do at university. And yeah, so was really lucky to get into university, get into the psychology degree, and then, went from there.
Wow, that's amazing. So is your sister a psychologist as well?
No. So she paused her degree for a period of time. She's gone back now and she's actually studying a double degree in psychology and criminology, but she will not be becoming a psychologist. She is like, not for me, definitely not. She'll probably become a criminologist, or she'll do PhD in research in criminology. But don't quote me on it. She could change her mind at any time. But yeah, so she's doing a double degree now again. But yeah, you won't catch her being a psychologist. She says no. And I'm like, that's fair. I think that's probably, you do the criminology, I'll do the psychology, it'll be fine.
Yeah. It's so interesting though that her initial studies in psychology is what you got you hooked on it, but now it's you that does it and not her.
Yeah. And so my mum actually studied psychology at university too, but went on to become a
Oh,
teacher. Yeah.
okay. You've got a whole family that really loves that kind of aspect of things. That's so cool.
Yeah, the genetics was there. Look, it just needed to be activated.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of along the same lines of psychology, but I've done a lot of personal development reading, and two of the books that really stood out the most to me were The Compound Effect and The Slight Edge. So very similar. And I noticed that you have a viewpoint as well about a 4% shift. Can you explain a little bit more about that? Because I think that really ties into those two books, which I really found very impactful.
Yes. So I always go on about, and I always tend to say 2 to 4% shift. So I even sometimes break it down a little bit smaller. And the reason why I talk about 2 to 4% shifts within your mental health, within your business, within any kind of goal or change you're trying to create for yourself comes from the premise that if you try to do too much too fast, you're going to overwhelm yourself, you're going to overwhelm your system, you're much more likely to engage in unhelpful self-talk because you will have set yourself up where you may have, let's go classic, bitten off too much than you could chew. And then it really sets you up to kind of not achieve what you want to achieve from the get-go. And it's not necessarily that you're not capable of it. It's just a lot harder to do those bigger, 25%, 50, even 60, 70 shifts. Some people even go for 100, right? Because I know, wow, I'm just going to do cold turkey, but it does make it incredibly harder to sustain and to really change those neural pathways in the brain where it's consistency that is going to create the change and create a really solid foundation for you to be able to maintain that. And so we want to break it down, and we want to not, it's really just like your brain is a muscle, and it's very similar to if you're somebody who wants to go to the gym and you want to get more muscle, for example, we have to treat it the same way. You're not going to see the change right away, but even going to the gym 1 day a week can be a lot more effective than if you start from zero, right? But if you go 5 days a week, you're probably going to maintain that for 3 weeks. And then you're going to be like, well, I only went 1 day like last week, and you start to feel really probably poor about yourself and probably start talking, unhelpfully. And if you had instead gone, okay, I'm going from zero, let me start 1 day a week. And then you get to 3 weeks and you've gone 1 day a week, your mindset and the way you're talking to yourself and the way you feel about yourself is going to be much different. And again, you can see you're more likely to continue on and increase and go, okay, I've done 1 day a week, let me do 2 days, and still feel good about yourself, and still probably more likely to go on that trajectory that is more aligned with your goal than say if you went for 5 days a week and then you weren't able to do it. So I apply that to the brain as well. And really for anything you set out for yourself, because again, in business, I'm going to do a podcast, I'm going to release a course, I'm going to, what's something else we love to do? I'm going to do post every day on social media is a common one that I see.
That's a big one.
Yeah. And so what's going to happen is those things are going to start to fall away, because anything new is a stressor. And then you're going to start to tell yourself, I can't, I'm failing, I'm not going to be successful. And again, it's how it also impacts that self-talk, and your relationship with you is your biggest predictor of your success. So if we start smaller and we get you feeling good, we get you setting this scaffold where, look at what I achieved, yesterday, the day before, instead of looking at what I didn't achieve, then we go, maybe then you'll be able to have more sustainable long-term change, still reach your goals, and also be able to maintain them.
So it's like 100% the reason that New Year's resolutions fail, because everyone goes full force 100%. And then 3 weeks from now, they're just like, I can't do it. Okay.
Yeah. Anything new in your business, you have to, I get people to think about it. It's a stressor within itself. And any exercise, any practice that you pick up, if you do too much at once or you expect too much at once, then you're going to overwhelm your system, and your system is your body. And then again, more isn't always better, better is better. So Dr. Perry Nicholson talks about that in his trainings frequently. And I really come back to that, in that more isn't necessarily better, better is better. And sometimes the simple things that we don't do, the common sense things aren't always done well or frequently.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah.
So how can entrepreneurs take this 2 to 4% shift concept and put it into practice so that they can build effective habits that will support them reaching their goals long term?
Yes. So one of the simplest ways is to just look at your expectations that you're setting for yourself. Are you getting too caught up in wanting everything now? Because you might need your business to be successful. You might want to be doing a podcast, daily postings on social media, and you might want to be releasing a course. Like, you might be so driven and so excited and you want to do it. However, it's then pulling back and going, hold on, but is this maintainable long term? What do I have going on in my life? So I always say it starts with being realistic and going, yes, I want all of these things, but how can I do it in a way which is going to feel good for me, is going to make me feel good about myself? Because where your mind goes, your energy flows. So you want to really protect that. And so you want to break it down and go, okay, what do I want to prioritize first in my business? What do I feel is going to allow for me to feel good about myself, to be working towards my goals within my business, but isn't going to necessarily overwhelm me to the point that I'm going to end up back in bed being like, I'm not going to be successful, I'm not going to be able to do it. So break it down and go, okay, these are all the things that I want to do. How can I get this started in a way that is going to make me feel good and is going to break it down? And so it might even be, don't underestimate the power of just thinking about what you're going to do, visualizing what you want to do, seeing yourself be successful. That's a 2% shift. If you spend a week kind of just planning it out and thinking about, okay, what is it going to feel like to go live on Instagram or to post an Instagram story? Because for some people, that's huge. For other people, they're like, I do that every day. But for somebody new within their business or somebody who isn't comfortable on camera, that's a huge shift. But for other people, they're like, well, really within the scheme of your business, that's a 2% shift. but that within itself can feel incredibly overwhelming. So it's even just being aware of, what's the 100%, right? The 100% may be what you want to achieve for your revenue that year. And so you go, okay, what's a 2% shift I can do every day that's going to move me towards that? Or what's a 4% shift that can move me towards that? And that's going to look different for everybody. But the main concept is that you focus on what you did rather than what you didn't do. And you try to keep just in your own lane as well, because we don't want to overwhelm with the noise that surrounds us. Does that make sense? Did that break it down?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking of one of my own examples that I did. So I think this was more than a 2% shift, but slowly it's
That's
become,
okay. You can
I
do
guess,
6
quite
to 10.
manageable. Okay. All right. One of the things that sorry. One of the things that I did, the habit that I implemented actually is getting up early so that I have a proper morning routine so that I can get myself set for the day. So kind of what you were talking about with your course, actually. So I get up and I do some reading and some journaling, and then I usually do some movement, get dressed, and then I try and get a little bit of work done before my kids wake up and the chaos ensues so that I am controlling my day and I feel accomplished
Yes.
before, breakfast. Yeah, so I think that that's a really big one. And it probably started as a 2% shift. And, I would get up 10 or 15 minutes early and I would just like get dressed. And for me, that was huge because there were days when I was wandering around at 3 o'clock and I still didn't have a bra on because my kids wouldn't give me 5 minutes to be alone.
Yes.
But
Been
now
there.
my morning routine is, yeah. Now my morning routine is more like 2 to 2.5 hours some days so that I have that whole time. But yeah, it started with that 15 minutes and then the percentage grew, which is really cool to think about because you don't see it happening. It just kind of does. And you have to reflect on all of that.
Yeah, so important. And I want to know everybody's 2 to 4% are going to feel different to somebody else's. So somebody's 2% could be somebody's 6%. And that it's very variable and just so personal as well. So yeah, I just want to make that note too.
Absolutely. One of the other things that I do in the morning is practice gratitude daily, which has been a huge thing for transforming my mindset. Highly recommend that practice to anyone. And I actually saw and downloaded your Gratitude with a Twist, your 7-day realignment experience, the free resource that you have available. So I would love for you to just share a little bit of that with our listeners. And I'll put a link in the show notes too, because I downloaded it and I thought it was a very well done activity for people to go through.
Yes. So gratitude is one of the practices that I find that most people that walk into my office, or most people really, we can just summarize it there, can really benefit from. And it's a practice that doesn't have to take up a huge amount of your day, but it can have really significant changes if you stay with it. And again, it comes to that point of consistency as well. And we know that there's research that has shown that it does change certain parts of the brain. So we know it can lead to increases in well-being, increases in motivation, resilience, I said motivation, didn't I? And just even emotional awareness as well. And so the concept that I talk about when we think about gratitude is what you think about, you bring about. And again, it's that power of where your attention is going and where we are spending that kind of resource of energy and that mental mind space. And so what we think about, we bring about. If we're shifting our mind consciously and choosing, especially at the start, it's really a conscious choice to try to go back through your day, or if you're starting your day, think about what you're grateful for. And so I initially get my clients to practice it in the evening, reflecting upon their day, because it can be harder to just bring about gratitude if you haven't been practicing it. And so you just pick out 3 things within that day that you were grateful for. And what I tend to do is I tend to pair gratitude with imagery, because when we fire up our senses, what that actually does is it then increases the likelihood of us engaging in that behavior again. So when you're going through the
Oh.
gratitude, I provide them with an imagery recording track. It's kind of like a meditation in a way. And so what that does is it gets you to really take yourself back and immerse yourself in that experience. And when we tap into those senses and we tap into the imagery of it, then what that does is it starts to bring about those feelings of gratitude and any other positive feelings that you were experiencing in that moment. It starts to activate them when you are reflecting upon it. Excuse me.
Mm.
And then what will happen is that increases that kind of like motivation to engage in similar tasks or similar activities or certain behaviors the next day, or to connect with those people again. And therefore, we can kind of see then how that kind of change in the emotional regulation can come about, the increase in the emotional awareness, the motivation, and where engaging in regular motivation, not motivation practice, gratitude practice can also increase physical health outcomes, because you're more likely to engage in those activities that you are grateful for, right? So if you're grateful for your daily walk and you really tap into, if you're somebody that, wants to be a regular walker, tapping into gratitude for it, and like gratitude for the sun on your skin and the sound, or seeing, the butterflies or the birds or the ducks, whatever it may be, wherever you walk, and you fire up those senses and you tap back into it, then when you wake up the next day, you're more likely to want to engage in it the next day. So not only does it help you start to shift your mindset while you're actively doing it, then what happens is that when you're in the present, you're more likely to start tapping into gratitude in the moment as well. So there's all these positive benefits that can come from this practice. And it's not necessarily a complicated practice. It can be a hard practice for some people, because they will have to dig and really look for something to be grateful for, depending on where their life is and their circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be a tiny moment. It could be, what's the example I like to use? You were sitting and you saw, let's go for something really basic. What's the example I give in my book? I think you're going for a walk and you see kind of like a robin, for example, and you really enjoyed that moment. And that could be the one moment throughout the day that you felt at peace and you felt present within your body. And yeah, so I just think there's so many benefits to it, and you can
Mm-hmm.
layer as well. So what my resource does is it layers different elements. It gets you to tap into your body, and it gets you to tap into what thoughts you spent the day within. And so again, you're increasing your emotional awareness, not just through the gratitude, but through reflection and connection, both with your body, your felt sense, so what you feel within your body, your sensations, but also again, you're tapping into your thoughts too. So again, you're becoming more aware of what state you're spending your day within. So yeah, I love a layering experience. I'm all about it. And you will find I would do that wherever I can. But again, we don't want to overwhelm. So you might start with one activity and then work your way around. But yeah, so can be incredibly helpful. And if you think about your business, focusing on the things you're grateful for rather than the things that you feel you haven't achieved or that are hard or difficult, that within itself can also improve your relationship with your business and how you're feeling about it, particularly through those times where you're starting, or you might not be seeing the results that you want to see.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And that kind of brings me to another question that I had about that. So, aside from practicing gratitude and some of the imagery things that you just mentioned, I feel like one of the big things that kind of halts entrepreneurs' progress is getting caught and stuck in the comparison game. So I wondered if you had any advice and suggestions to kind of help us stay grounded and like out of that negative mindset, so we really can focus on our goals and go at it without all of the stuff that comes up.
Yes. I think one thing to come back to would be that concept of what you think about, you bring about. And the idea that thoughts are not facts. Often we're basing our thoughts based on our feelings, and our feelings are often based on what we are perceiving other people to be doing, how successful we perceive other people to be. And one thing to always be really conscious of is that what you're seeing as well is not facts. You're seeing a drop in the ocean of what is that person's reality, and you're seeing what they want you to see. They're portraying themselves the way they want to be portrayed. And what you really have to be doing is being mindful that comparison is the thief of happiness, I tend to say, but also the thief of creativity, because you're so caught up in what everybody else is doing, and you're so caught up in comparing yourself to them. And then in a way you feel, often people feel, whether it's conscious or unconscious pressure to adapt and to be like them in order to be successful. And then that takes your opportunity away from yourself to tune into yourself and to tap into your creativity and to create a business and products and messaging that is true to who you are and that really speaks to your audience and your people, right? Because you aren't necessarily wanting to attract their audience or to have the business that they have or to run their business or do their business the way that they do it. We want you to always come back to you. And the biggest predictor on the success of your business is always going to be your relationship with yourself. And so if you are spending too much time comparing yourself to other people or, you know, focusing your attention on their success, what they're doing, how did they get there, then it really robs you of that creativity. And that's your creative genius. Like that is who you are. And business is such a wonderful opportunity to be creative and to be true to yourself and to be able to show the world what you can provide for them through your business. That I really, it's really horrible and sad when you see people lose themselves in the comparison game, because then that pressure you put on yourself also becomes so limiting and it becomes so overwhelming. So the biggest recommendation is always going to be come back to yourself. Try to stay in your lane. I always talk about bracketing people to my clients. Sorry, it's a bit cold here, believe it or not. And so what we want to look at is bracketing them. And so if you're getting caught up in comparing yourself to somebody else, you mentally just put a bracket around it and go, hold on. How much, where, again, coming back to that saying, where your mind goes, energy flows, you want your mind to be on you. And you have to consciously be aware of where your mind's going. So certain kind of small exercises, such as looking at, and I think it's within that gratitude journal, there's a exercise that, hold on, do I have one? I can't be bothered. So there's an exercise that says, I have to get up and unblock. So there's an exercise which gets you to identify where your brain has been most of the day. So where your thoughts have spent, where you've spent most of your time with your thoughts. And that can be really helpful, because if you're spending most of your time focused on your competitors or focused on other people, then that's going to be a really big indicator that you might need to do some work in coming back to you and looking at what are the beliefs and what are the kind of, let's just call them beliefs. What are the beliefs that I'm holding that are making me focus so much on other people rather than myself? And you could even just say thoughts. And generally it's that you have to be like them, or that how did they get there? How did they become so successful? Like, how do I do what they're doing? And again, that really robs you of being able to stay true at times to yourself, or puts too much pressure on that you just kind of go, it's too much, actually. I'm going to, again, go back to bed and go, I can't do it. Why bother? I'm not going to be successful anyways.
I really appreciate that you explained it that way, because a lot of people are like, oh, it's the thief of joy. But when you're like, it's the thief of your creativity, that hit really close to home, because as an entrepreneur, especially in the realm of social media, like my business is creativity. And if I'm constantly focused on what other people are doing and it's draining my creative batteries, not only does it make it harder for me mentally, but my clients aren't going to see the same kind of results either. So not only does it impact me, it impacts them. So yeah, that really resonates. Now, I know you also have a focus on supporting women, but also in the peri and postnatal periods, so the transitions around motherhood. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions about that, specifically your recommendations on how we can prepare for and support that transition into motherhood while running a business. I don't know if you have any recommendations that can kind of help us get ready.
I will say the recommendations are going to be kind of broad in a sense because it's so personal how you want to do that journey and how you want to be postpartum
Mm.
and what you want that period to look like. So generally, I come back to three things. So boundaries, communication, and expectation. So
Okay.
we look at communicate, firstly, getting clear on your boundaries, both within your business during those periods, getting clear on what you want them to look like. So again, that's coming a little bit into those expectations, and then how you're going to communicate that with the people around you. So essentially like that village. And for some women, unfortunately, that village may be incredibly small, but still it's really important to communicate. So, I think about that period leading into birth. How do you want that to look? How are you going to protect your energy going into birth? So both your physical, but also your mental energy, because as you lead into birth, it's also preparing your mind, preparing your body as well, and then also having to prepare a business. So I love a good spreadsheet. I love having everything outlaid, or a great Monday board, for example, and doing
Okay.
that quite early on, because you never know what you're going to be like in
Mm.
that third trimester, or as you go into or you become closer to birth, and you never actually know what each pregnancy is going to look like, for example. And so
Mm-hmm.
just having as clear of a picture that you can have on what your needs are, what your wants are, what your non-negotiables are, and also who you are
Mm.
going to need to support you to implement these things. So whether it's actioning tasks, delegating tasks, or, reinforcing boundaries, communicating boundaries, and that goes across both work and both personal as well. So then we also want to think about that time, particularly postpartum, even those first 2 weeks. What are the boundaries that you want to have? What do you want that period to look like? How do you want people to interact with your newborn? Do you want people around you in those first 2 weeks?
Mm.
Who do you want around you? How are you going to protect your energy? How are you going to protect that beautiful newborn bubble? And for some women, they might have to go back to work relatively fast. For other people, they may have more time. And so again, it comes down to the personal experience, but it would be around, before you give birth, communicating those boundaries. So you're not having to do it when you're in that haze and that sleep deprivation, and when the baby just cries, witching hour, which I don't like the term witching hour, but I think a lot of people know what that refers to, when you're
Mm.
just so overwhelmed and everything's new. And so really having a clear communication, and also with your partner as well, so they know what you want. Also nourishing your body as well during that period. How are you going to nourish yourself both during the postpartum period, but also when you go back to work, especially if you're a breastfeeding mom, because I think that
Mm.
uses about 25% of the body's energy just to breastfeed alone. And that's pretty huge. And then if you're running a business and you're sleep deprived, all of those things. So I like to come back to communications. What are your expectations? And also those boundaries. So that tends to be what I recommend, is that broad overview. Much easier when you're working
Mm-hmm.
one-on-one to really dig deeper. But just coming back to those points, was that clear enough of an explanation around those three?
Yeah, I think those are really good. And like, especially the boundaries piece, I feel like that is super critical for entrepreneurs because usually we
Mm-hmm.
are the business. And
Mm-hmm.
especially if you are a service-based business, then,
Yes.
you really need to communicate with your clients. These are the
Mm-hmm.
weeks that I am taking off. This is
Mm-hmm.
how you're allowed to communicate with me. And if so, when?
Yes.
Uh, and
And even if you
I
can't,
don't
having it.
necessarily
Oh,
think
I was
I
going to
was
say
gonna say, I
have a
don't
buffer.
necessarily think I did.
Sorry.
Hmm. Yes. When I went on maternity leave this last time, in January, I was just like, yeah, we'll just like kind of see what happened. And it actually worked not too bad. My partner was able to take, I think it was 6 weeks off. So I ended up doing a lot of work, not for my clients. I had like already set that and it was good to go. But for myself, and I felt really energized being able to kind of work on some of those passion projects. I find that with every child comes a new project or an idea that I want to do. So I was able to start working on it right away, which felt nice. Yeah. But I know, like you said, every pregnancy is different. And, you know, if I were to have another child, that might not be the case again. So I definitely think I want to set better boundaries if I were to go through that process again about, okay, this is the time that I'm taking, and maybe even have some supports in place for my business so that I have someone else that they can contact if they need something. Cause I was more or less on call.
Like having just hiring a VA just for that purpose is sometimes a recommendation, and having a buffer so the clients, you're not having to see those emails, because again, that kind of pops that little bubble a little bit, because your mind just shifts into business mode where you might really just want to take that precious time that you may get with your newborn, right? And so, or to even just allow that creativity to flow. So sometimes if you do have the capacity, having that little bit of a buffer, having a VA or having somebody, even if you need a family member to be responsible for looking at the emails and replying and saying she's on maternity leave, here are, you know, the alternatives. I know some people will kind of give their caseload to somebody else while they're on maternity leave. You know, as a psychologist, that's what I did, because you can't just leave your clients. You give them to other psychologists during that time. And a good mindset that I tend to tell myself, if you are kind of sharing some of your workload or delegating your workload, is that anybody can do my job. I am replaceable, because sometimes we get caught up in that mindset that it has to be us and that we need to do it. And so releasing a little bit of that control can be incredibly hard. And so just having that, it can sound a bit brutal to be like, I'm replaceable, like anybody, like another psychologist can do my job, or another social marketer can do my job. But the reality is that they can do your job. It might not be how you would do it, or, you know, exactly how you would want it, but they can do it enough that hopefully we can kind of soften and surrender a little bit into giving a little bit of that control over as well, so that we can have that time that we want with our newborns.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And now, are there any apps or supports or resources that you would recommend for women that are expecting and also entrepreneurs that can kind of help with that?
So in terms of expecting, I think the ones are typically Australian. So we have, what are they called? They have an acronym. Here, I'll just refer you to this. So I have a resource, which is all the apps that I tend to recommend to my clients. I think there is something like 24, maybe 26 apps on that list, and it's split into areas. And I do have a perinatal, postnatal section. I'm going to get really caught up on the fact that I can't remember the name of this. I did some training with them as well. Oh, COPE. Yes. So in Australia, we have a organization called COPE. So I think it's something like the Center of Perinatal Excellence, for example, and they have an app. But generally what I will say is I'll specifically talk to around the business side of things, because perinatal, postnatal is very specific. There are some meditation apps. There are some apps that have specific kind of goals and supports in them. I think there's even one in Australia that's linked to, I'm just really struggling recalling names. I'll let that one go. It is on the list. So if you do want to go to it, you can go to natashacourses.com/apps, and you'll be able to get the whole list there. But generally what I will say is find what feels good for you. So I always love a breathing app. So there's an app called Breathe Air, which it uses sound, and it uses a visual as well of this ball increasing and then decreasing. And I find, again, that's a really beautiful layering app, because not only do you have the breathing, and you can set how you're going to breathe, like how long you're going to breathe in for, how long you're going to pause, how long you're going to breathe out for. And then it also engages both your auditory senses and your visual. And so it's like a meditative aspect as well. So it takes your thoughts from out here and it brings them down too. And deep breathing is the fastest way to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of that fight and flight. So when you start to feel yourself getting overwhelmed and you start to feel yourself tensing up, or you start to notice kind of even those unhelpful thoughts, I always like to say, if you're somebody that responds well to deep breathing or breath work can be, it's with you at any time, okay? You don't have to use an app, but it can be really helpful for some people, especially if you're starting out. I always say find a good meditation app, one that has a voice that you like and one that has practices that you like. And that's so incredibly personal. So again, I've included several on that list that you can kind of play around with. And you don't have to even think about meditation as somebody taking you through a meditative track. I do like Insight Timer because it has kind of these really beautiful tracks. So they're called binaural beats. And they use different frequencies and stuff like that. And they can just be incredibly relaxing to listen to. And again, I love layering. So in the mornings, you don't have to sit down and necessarily meditate. But while you're making your coffee or you're sitting down in the sun, you can be listening to some of these meditative tracks. And then it's creating this experience for yourself. I always love another one would be Dailyo. So Dailyo is a really wonderful app which allows you to input what you did that day and also certain goals that you have. So you can pick and you can create your own goal. They've got all these cute little pictures that you can like match with your goal. For example, like if you want to exercise and you're cycling, they'll have a little guy on a bike. And what it does is it gives you statistics. It gives you a streak. It reminds you each day about your goal. It gets you to track your mood each day as well. And you can also pick what your moods are. You don't have to say just like happy or sad. I think you can edit it as well. So it's incredibly editable. And so you can use it to monitor and track. So your goals, your emotions, and also what you did that day. So you can track trends too. So on the days that I did gratitude, I noticed that I was ranking myself as higher. But when I stopped doing my gratitude, maybe my mood went down. So I didn't do it for a week and then I started to notice a difference. Look, it's probably unlikely that gratitude's going to have that much of an impact necessarily, that it's going to fully change your mood. But an example would be, a really good one would be exercising and even just going out into nature. And yeah, it's really, really helpful to track. And you can even put in certain things about your business. So it could be that you worked with a certain client on a certain day and you're like, I always notice when I work with that person. And again, it can help just bring about that awareness as well.
Okay, that's cool. I'll have to check that out. Now, if you're open to it, I like to ask my guests what's one thing they wish they knew before starting their business, or like a mistake you made and what you learned from it, to normalize that, we're not all perfect. We're learning as we go and we all make mistakes, and that's okay.
Yes. I love this question. And it's one that I reflect upon it a lot. And so, because I'm all about learning from the mistakes and also having that kind of like naivety when you go into business, you almost kind of need it because then you might not take the jump.
You do.
So I think in a sense, what I would say would be to focus on the possibility of the unknown instead of focusing on the fear of the unknown, because the possibility of the unknown is exciting, it's energizing, it can tap into that creativity. Whereas the fear of the unknown, if you spend too much time focusing on the fear of what could happen, or even when you're starting your business, like the fear of generally you have to, maybe take a pay cut, or you have to kind of overextend yourself financially to start the business. If you focus too much on that and what that could mean and the fear of it, then what will happen is you start to become very overwhelmed and you become, very limited, and the fear kind of takes over, and it really is something that you have to control. And you have to choose to focus on the possibility that could come from this and what you could change for yourself, rather than, again, like I said, when you focus on the fear, it becomes too daunting and it really just, you're wasting your time, and your time is one of your most, or if your precious gift. And so it's being able to choose more, to focus on the possibility of what could happen rather than the fear of the unknown. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think so. And I really hope that anyone listening that's been considering jumping into entrepreneurship will really take that piece of advice to heart, because it can be a huge thing. Like, I talk to so many incredibly talented people, and they're like working for someone else, and they're like, "Oh, one day I would really love to do this."
Mm-hmm.
And one day never comes, and it's just so sad about all of that unrealized potential and opportunity. So, yeah.
100%. And I think that really, I think taps into where that came from for me, which is I have had to sit with fear, but I never will have to look back with regret and say, and see the
Mm-hmm.
people in my industry, and to see the people that did what I wanted to do and that I felt really pulled towards, but I let that fear prevent me from stepping over it and into the possibilities and into success and allowing myself to be successful. Because often we have this weird relationship even with success and with being financially, stable or well off even. And so what we start to
Mm-hmm.
uncover even through stepping into business, it's such an incredible journey to learn about yourself and to learn about some of these preconceived ideas or these underlying beliefs that we may carry. And really, what I love to do is I love to look at other people. And again, we say comparison isn't great, but sometimes we need a community of people who are doing the thing. And I like to say women that are audaciously going after their goals and who are just, and it's such a privilege now to be in a position to be in a position where I have people around me, and I've got women around me who are doing what I'm doing, and I can come back to that and I can hear their self-doubt, but I can see them overcome that. Or some of the people that are so successful, hearing behind the scenes the fear and the uncomfortableness that they've had to overcome or they still experience regularly, that within itself is
Mm-hmm.
powerful. So the power of community versus the power of comparison, there is a difference between the two. And yeah, I love what you said, because that's really true. And being able to surround yourself with people who are doing it so that you can tap into
Mm-hmm.
that. Because what the brain does is that it adapts to its environment. So it will adapt to fit in with the majority because it doesn't want to be the minority. If everybody else is
Mm-hmm.
doing it, then it's like, I can too. And yes, it's scary, but I always say, shoot your shot. Don't leave your job to become an entrepreneur before you can. I'm not recommending that. Stick with the job. But if you really want to get into this space and you want to work for yourself and you want to build your own business, then make the commitment. And anytime you can grab, do the 2 to 4% shifts. It doesn't have to be huge shifts. If you've got an idea, go and register your business name. Go and get the website link that you want. Go and do your Instagram handle, because there are people that sit on that for so long. Just do that 2% shift and then another 2%. And I just thought of another app that I always use, my notes.
Mm-hmm.
And my recording.
Yes.
There's a really
Yep.
great app called Otter. It's a computer-based app, and then you can speak into it and it'll type it all up. Love it. Always so good, because
Mm.
then I've already got the foundation there kind of already written up. So short tangent. I'm always in my notes, and I'm always in recording my ideas, especially as a mum in business. You think you're going to remember it. Just how you think you're going to remember the
And you
new word your
don't.
kid said, you don't. Like, she said a new word today, but I don't know what it is. Because I thought I would remember it,
Yep.
but I didn't. So yeah, super important. Shoot your shot, take the chance, because that regret, especially when you do compare yourself to the people that are doing what you wanted to do or you're too scared to do, you don't have to live with that. You can choose differently. Not everybody can. I have to be really, honest. Some people are not in the position
Mm-hmm.
to, but that doesn't mean that someday you can't work towards it really slowly. And then, I always think it's just such an amazing industry. And I love seeing at the moment the amount of women that are just creating the lives that they've always wanted for themselves. And it's why I love the space and the
Mm-hmm.
work that I get to do, because I get to support women to get themselves to a place where they can be. Their nervous systems are in a place where they can go out and they're not in fight and flight all the time. They can actually shoot their shot. They can go after their goals. They don't have to sit in the fear anymore. And we can help them to overcome we call them unhelpful or maladaptive beliefs. We can help them to shift those, and so that they can be in a space so they can create this life. And it's just what I love. It lights me up. And I'm just so thankful that I get to be in it. But is it hard? Fuck yeah, it's hard every damn day. Okay.
Yep.
Every day. Do not ever compare yourself to me, because it is hard. And again, especially when you're a mom and you're trying to do it all. But the thing is that you just choose to focus on the good that comes from it. And there's a really wonderful quote that I will share. And I have worked with Tina Tower, and she's an amazing lady. And she speaks about this quote that says, being an entrepreneur is being willing to live your life for a few years in a way that many won't, so you can live the rest of your life in a way that many can't. And I hold on to that incredibly close. When I see people doing the things, going on the holidays that I want to be going on, and I've sacrificed that for this business so I can help women and I can do what I love, but it's for a short amount of time, right? And so it's a wonderful quote, and I always come back to it.
Yeah, I really like that. Definitely in the sacrificing phase of time, long hours, short weekends, helping family help with kids, but it'll be worth it in a couple of years when, we can travel and do all of the things that we would love to do as a family. So yeah. So just to wrap up before we go, I would love for you to share how people can connect more if they'd like to learn more about you. You also have a course that you're launching soon, which could be really interesting. So if you want to do a couple sentences about that as well, that would be fabulous. But yeah.
Yeah. So you can find me mostly on Instagram. Haven't been on there a lot lately because I've been doing a lot of creating, and I let it go. So it's called Graciously, full stop, you, full stop, psych. So psych is PSYCH. I do sometimes get it wrong. So if you get it wrong, you're not the only one. And I probably write it every day. And you can also find me at natashacourses.com. So currently, the courses will only be released for Australia. I am trying to find a way, because we have a lot of laws and a lot of regulations around being psychologists. So I am looking into possibly expanding where to. I'm unsure. It might be the EU first. I might not be able to, but I will put it on my social media when they become available. If you are listening to this and you are in Australia, my course Revitalize, it will be an evergreen course. So it will always be on the website, ready for whenever you want to take the offering, is designed to support women to revitalize their routines. So often women come into my space and they struggle the day kind of happens to them. And so it's to support them to support themselves and their nervous system through the day. It is short, but it is very, very beefy in a sense. And you can find it at natashacourses.com/revitalize. And yeah, you can go and look at all my offerings there. The gratitude journal's on there. The app list is on there. And you can also see that I have a course that I'm launching next year called Invitation to Align and Elevate. So that is my 8-week program. And that's what I was kind of touching upon earlier. So getting women's nervous system, their bodies, their minds all aligned so they can start to really elevate their lives.
They both sound incredible. So hopefully you're able to branch out and offer them in Canada and many other places as well. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on the podcast today and sharing your wisdom with us and so many practical tips that we can implement to help us make life and business better. So thank you so much, Natasha. And to our listeners, we will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in to Go Get Great. I hope you found some useful tips and tricks that can help you make life and business work together. If what I said resonates with you, please share it on social media, and don't forget to tag at Brittany Miller Socials so that I can celebrate you for taking those first steps towards achieving greatness. Remember, success doesn't happen overnight. It takes dedication, hard work, and a lot of spirit. So don't be afraid to dream big and go after what you want. Keep striving for greatness. You get closer with every step forward, no matter how small they may seem. Until next time, go get great.